Welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Well, Rabbi Friedman, I know we've covered some interesting topics in the last few weeks. This one's interesting as well, and I kind of feel sorry for you rabbis these days. I got to tell you, your job is getting a little tougher. Maybe not so much you rabbis that are a little bit, ultra religious and stay on the track, but for a secular rabbi, this has got to be the toughest time he's ever had in his history, or she, in her history. You got a situation now where literally on a weekly basis there must be new. I mean, think about that the prayer book, I assume, now has to be on an iPad because there's so many changes that are happening on a weekly basis now. You take the orders that come down from the administration of things that have changed. I mean, first you're against gay marriage, now you're for gay marriage, now there's transsexuals, now there's. I mean, you're changing weekly. I mean, I can imagine, the prayers you've got to have. They've already added in, Abraham, Isaac. They've now got, I think, a new Hispanic is in there. I think there might have been.
Isn't Isaac a Hispanic name?
Isaac could be. And I think there's some gay guy Cecil now they have to add in the prayers, which it's just so much changed, and I don't know how it happens. I mean, not to cut down your profession, but let's be honest, it's a pretty easy gig. You got one book. Mm-hmm. One book you got to learn. And you can if you go on vacation, you can carry it with you. You can take it wherever you are. It's the Torah. I made 5 books composed in it. It's one thing.
Put it on your phone.
The rest is all commentary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. So how do you then, if you're a rabbi, for you, I guess it's pretty easy, but for other rabbis, how can you change that one book? Mm-hmm. I mean, but the situation is now, with gay marriage. I mean, obviously, this rabbi has to now explain why he's for gay marriage, and he has to use the Torah as his example. Everything has to change. I mean, usually, especially in the sermons in the fall, I know you guys like your football analogies and everything like that. How does the rabbi come up? He can't talk about the Redskins. He now looks down, wait, Cowboys, they're out. That's racist and that's sexist. New England Patriots, come on. That's American exceptionalism.
Right.
That's gone. I'm figuring by we'll have a couple more teams. By the end of next year, you can talk about what? The Atlanta abortions, that's it. And then maybe the Tennessee trannies. That's about the only 2 teams you can even talk about now.
Right. It's not to mention all the animals that is probably like cruel. Abusive.
Dolphins that get caught in the net.
Dolphins and cubs and lions and bears and all the horrible things you're doing to all these things,
But the thing is, does the rabbi wait that week for when the memo comes down, no bears? There goes the whole sermon, the bears are out. But in a serious note, in a very serious note, I understand politicians. I mean, I don't understand them that well, but I understand, okay, if you're Barack Obama and you're Hillary Clinton, you're pro-marriage, pro-regular marriage, anti-gay marriage, don't ask, don't tell, until the middle of an election, right? Now we're pro-gay marriage. And Hillary's pro-gay, and Barack Obama's pro-gay, and every liberal's pro-gay, and anyone who is not made that conversion, that evolution right there on the spot, is a hater, probably committing hate crimes. And the poor rabbi now has to go into his shul.
Well, that's what progressive is, because they're always making progress.
Yeah, which is great.
And they don't have to worry about, the fact that yesterday I didn't stand by that, or I disagreed with that, because I made progress. That was yesterday, today is today.
But I get that on a politician.
Yeah.
But how does a rabbi make progress when, again, he's back to that one old book there?
Right.
And so I'm serious now. If a kid, a young boy or girl, has their bar mitzvah and the Torah portion in their secular shul is the one where it says, talks about homosexuality or talks about cross-dressing and things like that, do they literally, and I mean this seriously, do they skip that part now?
Right.
Or they're just hoping that nobody in the congregation speaks a lick of Hebrew anyway, so they're not going to know it?
One would think that they really would do that. You would think, right. But the amazing thing is they don't.
They don't.
And even more amazing is they reinterpret. And that's actually the part that gets me. I don't mind not believing in the book. I don't mind if they'd get up and say, we had this book. For years and years and years we liked the book, but we have found it is so horribly outdated. There's just too much regressive old attitudes. We kept it around for a long time because it had a lot of ethical messages. But the ethical messages that are in there are so intertwined with so many unethical things, and immoral things, like negative attitudes towards homosexuals and a whole slew of other types of things.
I even talk about how you treat your slaves.
There's slavery in there, and slavery, not to mention that there's laws that separate a husband and a wife depending on where her menstrual cycle is, and things are really. So I understand if they would say, you know what, we're just putting that aside because it's really doesn't talk to us anymore. And even the parts that do, it's just so hard to, like, deke them out of there and, tease them out. It's just, let's forget it. But that's not what they did. That's why I was kind of shocked. I picked up the paper, and a local Reform rabbi, when asked about the decision, of course everyone was very happy about the Supreme Court decision.
Right.
They asked him, well, isn't that at odds with what it says in the Torah? He says, no, we interpret that differently. We interpret that differently. Now that kind of got me a little bit.
Did he say how we interpret? Because
I think that he did, but to tell you the truth, I didn't. I heard a previous rabbi interpret it differently. It says a man should not lie with another man as he lies with a woman, and the rabbi said that's only if they're not married, which I thought was really interesting, by the way. This rabbi interpreted it as only if they're not married. So in other words, he was opposed to premarital homosexual activity.
Wow.
Not marital, but premarital he was opposed to. So I wondered, is he also opposed to premarital heterosexual activity? So that would be kind of interesting. That would be really interesting. The rabbi says, really, the Torah is okay with homosexuals, meaning the way he explained it was, of course, you have to make a commitment, which would sound to me as though he was saying that any extramarital, he would have been opposed to any extramarital activities, either between the same sex or separate sexes, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, he took like this big step forward with his interpretation of the Torah, but in certain ways he took like a big step backwards. So,
well, I don't see how I mean, and again, I'm not talking pro-gay, not gay, whatever. I just don't see how you possibly can take from those words and from where it's written, how it's written, any possible.
Right.
Listen, any logical human being is going to say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's impossible. You can't make that jump."
So let's take this in two stages. Number one, let's first be clear about why that's the wrong way to go about reinterpreting. That this reinterpreting thing is wrong. They say, well, we reinterpret it to read such and such. Why is the whole concept of reinterpreting wrong? Then we'll get to the second question, which is, why do they bother, if it's so wrong and so illogical, why do they bother to do it? But first things first, what's really wrong with reinterpreting? If I have a text, I have a book. Let's say I have a book that is written by George Wallace, when he was a young politician.
Yep.
It is some like racist, screed, that, real like pure George Wallace stuff. So then I want to say, well, he wasn't such a bad guy. So I go back and I reread the whole book, filled with all this like bigotry and hatred. And I say, no, he didn't mean that. And when he said this, he meant that. When he said that, he meant this. And really, he was talking about, and I reinterpret all of his words, and every word that he says that I could understand in a bigoted fashion, I give a different interpretation. Does it mean something else? Why? Why? Why bother to do that? Who cares? If that's what he meant, certainly that is what he meant. So why are you bothering to reinterpret? When I come up to the Torah, and I read something in the Torah, and it says something that kind of strikes me as odd, or maybe even rankles my morality or my ethics. Like a lady said to me just this past week. She said, do you believe that the temple will be rebuilt? I said, I certainly hope so. I do believe it will be rebuilt. She said, well, do you believe in animal sacrifice? So I said, if when the temple is rebuilt, if God says we're doing animal sacrifices, I'm all in. If God should say not, which will it be? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. I will be open. I'm going to go with whatever they got. So she says, I think it's barbaric. I said, well, okay. First of all, there's two things you have to do. Number one, when you read the text, you really have to stop and ask yourself, have I interpreted this correctly? That's number one. Perhaps it could be that what you're reading, you think it's saying X and it's really saying Y, so maybe, you really shouldn't get so rankled in the first place. Maybe you don't have it right. That's one thing. But then the second thing is that you have to then ask yourself another question. Where is it that I got my values
That's a good point.
that told me that this text is wrong? Most likely, where you got your values is from your culture. your society at your time and place.
Right.
For example, as I said to a group of people that were sitting down eating a meat meal, I said, how many people here eat dog? Not a one. No one was raising their hand. So I said, let's say I was talking to a group of people in China. I said, how many people here eat dog? A few people raised their hands, maybe all, maybe some, maybe few. I don't really know, but I know that in China they eat dog, at least. So I've been told. I've never been to China, but they tell me that in China they eat dog. It's not a big deal. Okay? So why is it, so I said, how come you don't eat dog? That's horrible, it's barbaric, it's how can you have like these beautiful pets and then you eat them? That's horrible. I said, well, how come in China they do? Why do they? So are they all barbaric? Are you saying that Chinese people are all barbaric? Right? So you say, no, it's really what you're saying is that the people in China, they come from a different culture, and in that culture, this is acceptable. In your culture, it's not acceptable. So you go around with a feeling, and a very strong feeling, so much so that when you would see someone eating a dog, you would label them as barbaric. And yet, you know full well that the only reason you're feeling that way is because you were raised in a culture that dictated that. Now, is it absolutely right or absolutely wrong? Is eating dogs absolutely right or absolutely wrong?
Probably neither.
It's probably neither. It probably has to do with the way your culture and its tastes and its standards and all that. Right? So here you are. You open up the Torah, you read they have animal sacrifices. You've termed the Torah barbaric. And yet, you know full well that the reason that you feel it's barbaric is merely because of cultural norms. So now, let's say the Torah says something about homosexuals. So homosexuals should not be married because homosexuality, according to the Torah, is considered to be abomination. But I don't believe that that's true. Why don't you believe that's true? Because your culture, in this time and in this place,
this week,
said, in this week, yeah, right, very much in this time and in this place, right? Capital T, capital P, right? Very much so said, it's okay. Said it's good. As a matter of fact, said to say no would be bad. Okay, that's fine. That's your culture, in your time, and in your place. So therefore, you might say, no, I don't like the book, therefore.
Right.
So you know what? You say that book came from a different time and a different place, and therefore, we're going to take that book and just, maybe we'll throw it out. Maybe we'll stick it on a shelf in the back, we'll keep it in a museum and harken back to the days when people didn't used to understand things the way we do.
Right.
Why are you bothering to reinterpret it so that the book agrees with you when you know full well that the book couldn't agree with you because it was coming from another time and place? This would be like saying that the Chinese guy writes a book and they're telling you how to cook dog, but they don't really mean dog. What they really mean was beef. They really meant cow. And you misunderstood the word dog is really cow.
Right. Right. That's a tough one.
Look, why would you bother to reinterpret the Chinese cookbook that's telling you how to cook dog to mean cow when you know full well? Now you might say, I don't like them. That's crazy. I don't like this book. I don't like that culture. You can say all kinds of stuff. But why reinterpret that to mean something that it clearly doesn't mean?
Well, because what's that rabbi going to do? I mean, that's why I'm saying I'm putting him in. He's got a tough position. He can't really throw out the Torah because then he can't put this kind of mask and disguise on the whole thing and say, no, we're studying Torah, we're talking Torah, because that's what Judaism is. You can't totally change Judaism.
And there is the rub. You see, the problem is the Torah is, as they say, writ large. The Torah is really big, even as much as everyone really doesn't like all that stuff it says. Yep. For example, let's stay right there, that same whole long paragraph. There are 18 other prohibitions.
Yep.
There are 18 other prohibitions. Adultery, incest, a whole variety of different incestuous relationships, bestiality, all these things. Not good, not good, not good, not good.
You know there's somebody on the left right now with a checklist. Okay, we got the marriage thing off there, the dress. Now we got to go for bestiality.
Right.
They're going down this list.
Yeah,
right
I happen to think that, but I bet you He didn't think that,
you
right?
don't
He's not there yet. No,
Yeah.
he's
He
thinking.
might know about it, but
he's thinking this is, of course. How could you say, two people, okay, they can't have love together and all that type of
You
stuff?
don't think George Soros is sitting in the back room right now with Hillary? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Some people are somewhere, but I don't think that necessarily that guy is.
No.
So that guy has thought. So that guy's got a little bit of a problem. He reads the whole list. Adultery, yes, I still stand by adultery. I think it's bad. Okay, I want to modify it in a lot of ways, but technically, no one's going to get up and say adultery is good. Okay, bestiality is bad. Incest is bad. All the various different types of incest is bad. Oh, there's only one of them in there that all of a sudden is reinterpreted. Why did that one get reinterpreted? How did you reinterpret? And by the way, if you're going to reinterpret that, then why don't you reinterpret all the other ones? So incest didn't really mean incest. It meant only your sister if you didn't get along with her growing up. Or only your sister if, I don't know what. Who knows?
Right.
Why do we reinterpret incest? Why did you only reinterpret this one? So it's really difficult. Now, you could say throw out the book. Well, if you throw out the book, then really the question is, what is prohibited and what isn't prohibited?
Well, that makes it tough.
Everyone agrees that we have a certain set of values.
Are you sure?
Everyone agrees that there are some values and that there are certain norms of mankind that have been passed on. Now, when we get to the ones that we don't like, so we want to change them, but to throw out all of them is really difficult.
Would it be like saying that you can, okay, I won't eat the pig, but the crabs and the lobster I'll eat? I mean, you get to work.
Right. I mean, really, how do people reinterpret shellfish? Like, what does that mean? When the Torah said it's got to have fins and scales, then you can eat it. Ooh, how does that get reinterpreted?
And first of all, how do you keep it? I won't eat the pig, but I will eat these. That's the part.
Nobody reinterprets fins and scales. They just don't pay attention to it.
They said that's not valid.
They just blow it off. Right. Okay, so then blow this one off. Why don't they just? Why does this one need to be reinterpreted? Why can't they blow it off? I believe it's because this is a statement that shows that this has been a norm since forever. It is placed with all the other norms that we believe, and if you don't reinterpret this, if you just blow it off, then you really have to blow off the entire paragraph. Then you've blown off incest, and you've blown off adultery, and you've blown off bestiality. You've blown all of them right out of the water, and they are really reluctant to do that.
Right, because those are pretty much not just the norms. That's the backbone of everything, right?
Right, that's right. So they're reluctant. So therefore, they reinterpret. Now, reinterpreting is foolish. It's to me, it's really a form of cowardice. If you really have the strength, stand up and say, "Listen, the book is hopelessly, regressively outdated. To have to go through the Torah, by the time you're done with it, to find the kernels of ethical teaching that we like, compared with the overwhelming preponderance of stuff that we don't like, would certainly, to me, get that book banned from a progressive library."
And the thing is, maybe in some part it already has been banned. For the most part, the reason they're losing a lot more people that are showing up at his temple every day is because it really already has been banned. I mean, and I think for the same reason, not literally, but the same reason the guy staying home is, I can't read it. It says that women can't do this, and that men do this and women can't. And I think they pretty much, that's why they don't go.
Well, if that's the case, then why didn't the rabbi just say, we don't believe in that anymore? Yeah, it's true. The Torah says that homosexuality is an abomination. The Torah is just old-fashioned. I mean, everything else in the Torah is old-fashioned. Why can't the Torah be old-fashioned about this? That's the sad part to me. So when I understand, if you read something in the Torah, you better really be very careful. Are you sure you got it right? Is that actually what the Torah meant? You have to really analyze and double analyze and triple analyze to make sure you got what it meant. But once you know what it meant, and it doesn't jive with what you're thinking, then you got one of two choices. You either walk away from it, or you got to walk away from the culture that told you otherwise.
Well, to take the other side of this issue, Well, people would say, "Wait, rabbis have been doing this since the very beginning of time. It says you can't eat
Good point.
the milk. I mean, from the kid goat, the mother milk. We're not doing that. I'm eating
Right.
a piece of chicken. Can I drink a glass of milk with a piece of chicken, or put cheese on the chicken? I mean, which rabbis get to interpret the Torah and which don't?
That is a really, really good question. By the way, the interpretation that they made it even more strict.
Well, that's the thing too. That's why we listen to you guys.
Notice that most of those interpretations took the law and made it even farther reaching.
That's the problem.
Not even minimize it, but they made it far reaching. There are some instances, for example, there is a very interesting passage in the Torah that says, we all heard of it, an eye for an eye.
Right, okay, there you go.
Okay, and we do not understand, and we have not understood for centuries and centuries, we have not understood that an eye for an eye means that if A poked out B's eye, that the court takes A and pokes out his eye.
Now,
We don't do that.
If you were a Muslim, who
Yes,
read that same clause,
that's right.
They would cut your hand off if you steal. They take your eye out of.
That's right. So
do that.
we have certain guidelines of interpretation, and that is true. We do have certain guidelines of interpretation, and following those particular guidelines, we came out with the conclusion that that means money. Actually, the Talmud came out with the conclusion that it means money, meaning they have to pay for the value. You have to assess what the value of the eye is and pay that value. But that is true. That was a liberal interpretation. That is a liberal interpretation. It goes all the way back to the Talmud itself. All the way back to the Talmud. So therefore, you might say, well, if so, then I can interpret also. In which case I would only ask, okay, fine. But there's got to be some guidelines. Even the Supreme Court, even when they came out with the predictable decisions that they come out with, and you can pretty much call it, on any. If it's anything that has to do with a popular social issue, you can pretty much call it in advance. But even they work within a certain set of guidelines, and they write opinions.
So you get to dissent.
Right, and you get to dissent. But they give opinions and they explain what their rationale was for interpreting this or that. Okay, but the rationale for reinterpreting the line in the Torah about homosexuality, for example, didn't exist. Like, what rationale? Based on what? Based on where do you see similar technique is used? So the Torah has been around for a long time, and we have this situation. And I understand. You might say, listen, if you think that the rabbis in the Talmud are a bunch of phonies for interpreting, so then drop it. Just drop it. Walk away from it. Say, I just don't believe in it. Why bother to interpret? If they were playing games, why would you want to play a similar game?
Which makes sense. Or their answer might be, well, maybe the big group of world rabbis need to get together and have another interpretation. All of you, and that's probably the biggest thing, they're trying to convince you more than anybody else. Come on, Rabbi Freeman, make a change.
If the book can merely be interpreted by a bunch of rabbis getting together and reinterpreting, then I have a better idea. Don't even bother. Save the plane tickets from going to the convention.
Right.
You're going to a convention to figure out how the Torah actually means. They have all decided in advance before they get there what it is that they're going there to reinterpret.
Yep.
Okay? I mean, listen, and we could have said the same about the Supreme Court. Okay? I think that we could have said
accused a couple of them who actually ruled on those things before.
Well, with the exception of maybe one or two, right? That we didn't know going in, maybe one, right? But otherwise, we pretty much knew how everyone was going to come out. So why don't we just say, hey guys, spare us the time, spare us the energy. Okay, we know that you guys are going to vote this way and you guys are going to vote that way. Let's just ask the one guy that we don't know. We're just not sure which way he's going to go.
Right.
Okay? And when the guy finally, why does he have to bother to come up with a whole learned analysis of the Constitution and law? Just say what it is that he wants to see happen. He's for homosexual marriage. He's against homosexual marriage. And that's it, and that way we'll know. Why do you have to go through that exercise? I say the same thing about rabbis that want to get together to reinterpret the Torah. Why bother? We know what you want to do, so why are you bothering going through the exercise? And what laws and what rules govern you in this process? And why are you bothering to make everyone so, it wastes so much time and energy to wait and hear what is your decision?
So I guess we pretty much already know that.
Right.
I think the main thing is they're reluctant because their main goal is to change your mind. Because if they change your mind, I mean, listen, they don't want you going and say, hey, I'm a bigger, stronger Jew than you are, so, I think that's the big thing.
I really think that the bottom line is that they know that if you do not have any semblance of association with the Torah, what is it that gives you the right to call yourself a Jew?
I agree with you on that.
In other words, if you could just make your decision, so then fine. You are an enlightened, progressive member of Western society. You are a priest of Western values. You are whatever you want. Call yourself whatever in the world you want and make a group and worship that way. And if people support that and come to it, it's all fine and dandy. But in order to call yourself Jewish, if you have no association with the Torah whatsoever, then why are you different than anyone else? And that is why they're spending all the time to try to reinterpret the Torah, because they still want to maintain an association with the Torah. And in that way, I have to give them credit, because they're still hanging on. But, while they're hanging on, they should stop and ask themselves, if you're hanging on to it because you believe in that you need to be identified with it, ask yourself why. The answer why is because it is a thing of great value. And you don't want to abandon it. If it's a thing of such great value, then why do you spend so much time reinterpreting it? Why don't you stop and listen and say, maybe it knows better than me? It's been around for a good long while.
Some pretty smart people throughout the ages have kind of stuck with it.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. I just have a feeling, we'll probably be talking this more and more, because this is not going to stop here. I mean, there's not going to be much left of the Torah that you can stick to if you keep going down this path of reinterpretation, and maybe our society, like happens in societies, will go so far this way that it'll start going back the other way. I don't know, but I think it's going to be a tough time. They're going to have to be very limber. Very limber, the rabbis these days, to be able to do all the positions they're going to have to be in to maintain that they believe in the Torah.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone really particularly cares about them maintaining the Torah except themselves, because from there they really derive their legitimacy. And that's why they want to hang on to it. But if it's not for the Torah, then what is their legitimacy? Then any man can. Let's say a guy, let's say the UPS driver. UPS driver just decides, I'm a rabbi. Okay. If he gets a bunch of people and pay dues, he's a rabbi.
That makes sense.
He's a UPS driver. He just never knew any Jews, never married any Jews. I'm a rabbi. I call myself a rabbi. I'm a rabbi, and I opened a synagogue, and I'm calling it a synagogue. And what do you believe in? I don't believe in anything, or I believe in Confucius.
I just believe in today.
Yeah, I believe in Confucius, but I'm gonna call myself a rabbi. Okay, fine, good.
Fair enough. This is going to be a topic I think that's continuing, because I think we'll be digging deeper into the Torah of things that we're not allowed to do really soon. I have a feeling right now, or the things that we are allowed to do now.
Yeah.
Really soon. So I hope you can keep up with the times, Rabbi Friedman.
We can keep up because we got to. There's more episodes of Jeff and the Rabbi.
Yeah, we got to keep going.
If it wasn't for the times, where would Jeff and the Rabbi be?
That's true. That's true. All right, well, good. Well, I guess next week we'll be back with hopefully something, something a little.
Who knows what next week? By next week,
right.
It could be allowing who knows what.
Next week, maybe different kind of rabbi that we'll have.
Yeah, that's right.
He might be out, so we'll see. See you next week.